Well, hey everybody! Welcome to the Chicago Burlington and Quincy Railroad and the Chicago and Northwestern Railway in Wyoming. Today is the 3rd of March 2024 and this is Layout Update number 52. I'm Mark Pruitt, Casper Division Road Foreman of Engines. I had kind of a mixed bag of progress and stagnation in February. I spent some time working on locomotives, got a bit more rock work done in the south end of Wind River Canyon, made a trip to Cody to look at what's left of the rail facilities there with Dave, and fought with a couple of Windows 11 laptop computers trying to tie JMRI Decoder Pro through them to my NCE system. I'm adding something new to the update video starting this month, a section right after the logos at the end that will be a brief look back at a snapshot in time of my older layouts. I call it the Cronkite segment. I'm sure some of you more seasoned folks will know why once you see it. So, on with the show. We'll start again this month with the Pacific. As I mentioned last month, the pulling ability of the loco leaves a bit to be desired because the boiler weight rests over the front set of drivers and the pilot truck. The two sets of drivers behind them have very little weight, so have very little grip on the rails. To try to balance the loco and put more weight on the rear drivers, I bought a small ingot of bismuth alloy. This stuff has a melting point just below the boiling point of water, meaning it can easily be handled and poured without a lot of specialized equipment. In fact, the only bit of equipment I need is a small pan or such to melt the alloy in. I found exactly the right thing when I came across this tiny skillet at a thrift store. So of course I had to try it out. I put the ingot in the skillet and set it on the stove. 5 minutes later, the alloy had melted. After it cooled back down, I had this. The skillet is Teflon, so the metal falls right out. A few of you sharper-eyed viewers noticed that, in the opening titles video of the February update, the S2 lunged ahead slightly before dropping to a slower speed. I wasn't pleased by that, but I figured I could program it out of the decoder after I got Decoder Pro working on my layout. I did get Decoder Pro working with my NCE system, though that was a very time-consuming and frustrating job. And it turns out it only worked for one night. I'll talk about that later in the video. Anyway, using Decoder Pro, I switched the decoder to use the speed table rather than the 3-point speed curve that's used by default. When I set speed step 1 to a value of 1, the lunging went away completely. I settled on a value of 2 for speed step 1 to ensure smooth, slow movement. I'll let the mechanism run in for a while, then go back and retweak the speed table for better performance. After getting the Pacific and 10-wheeler 1395 onto the rails in the last few months, I decided to continue in that vein and get the Spectrum Consolidation I bought in early December ready to go to work. Which leads me to a short little rant. I had to order a decoder for the Consolidation, and it came in on February 9th along with a few other things. This is the condition of the package I received through the U.S. Postal Service. Ordering online is common for most of us these days, and unfortunately, so is receiving packages that are beat to crap by the delivery service, whether it's the post office, UPS, or even FedEx. Also arriving that day was the new roll of cork, and this package was also torn up, this time courtesy of United Parcel Service. Fortunately, everything in both packages was undamaged and nothing was missing. But what crappy service these shipping companies provide these days. I'm sure you've all got your own horror stories too. I spent a day installing the decoder and speaker, then prepped the loco for decaling by brushing on a bit of gloss coat in the areas to be decaled. I have data that shows 3 consolidations that were in Casper during my era, numbers 3114, 3101, and 3188. This is 3101 in the Casper yards in 1931. I was going to number the loco 3101, but decided on 3188 instead. I wasn't sure 3101 was still in Casper by the late 1930s, while a spreadsheet of Burlington motive power assignments I have shows that both 3114 and 3188 were. Using the photo of 3101 as a guide, I started by placing the logo on the tender. It's still wet in this shot. You can see how it covers part of the rivet lines, and it's not settling down over them very well. By the next day, helped along by a couple applications of microsol, the decal sucked right down over the rivets. Then I started on the locomotive itself. For some reason, the Spectrum model has a protrusion in the center of the area under the cab windows, which isn't on my prototype. I'm not modifying the model to more closely match the prototype at all. If I were, I'd have to change the domes, move the headlight, rearrange the piping, plus a whole lot more. Maybe someday, but for now I'm happy to just number the thing for a loco that really ran over the Casper division. To deal with the protrusion on the side of the cab, I decided to just put the first two numbers on one side and the other two on the other side. Here's the 88 on the right side of the bump. By the next day, I had the engineer's side of the loco completed. All in all, it didn't come out half bad. I even put the engine number in the number boards that flank the headlight, though you can't see it here. That was fun. Those numbers are a scale 4.5 inches tall, or about 3/64 of an inch. That's tiny. By the 17th, I had the locomotive finished and on the rails. You can kind of see the number board numbers in this shot. Don't look too close though. They're not lined up real well, but hey, at least they're there. It's good enough for me, at least for now. You can still see the gloss-coated areas where the decals were applied. Weathering, I hope, will hide that. May be a while though. After I finished the decals, I lubricated the running gear and plopped the loco onto the track in Casper. I coupled up a short train and sent it on a tour of the layout. Here, we're departing Casper eastbound. In short order, the train reached Orange/Grable. Rather than head down into east staging as would be normal in an operating session, I kept it on the main line as it crossed the swing gate. At this point, it was magically at the west end of the layout and headed east towards Basin. After passing through Basin, Worland, and Thermopolis, the train headed into tunnel number 2 in the Wind River Canyon. Here, it's about to exit that tunnel. Then it was on through the other tunnels in the canyon, past Powder River, and finally back to Casper. 3188 will probably be assigned to work locals out of Grable. Next up, we'll talk about Wind River Canyon. On the 18th of the month, I started in on rock work again, mixing up plaster and casting and applying rocks. Here's the patchwork of rocks at the south end of the canyon that day. After applying a couple of new rocks, I thought I'd try to blend some of the castings together, so I mixed up a thicker batch of plaster. After troweling on a couple of batches of that stuff, the area looked like this. I didn't color match the first blending batch too well, did I? Not to worry, as it turns out most of that will be covered over anyway. We're looking at a photo of the south entrance of the canyon. These cliffs here are what the rock face with the dark blending plaster on the layout is supposed to represent. The modeled rock face doesn't have those steps in it, plus it's just not vertical enough. I'm going to add more plaster rocks to try to more closely emulate this stair-stepped cliff. This is the first application of the new cliff faces at the very top. I'll build on and out from this as I go down the slope. With appropriate textures added at the top of the steps, hopefully I'll wind up with something that at least suggests the real rock structures in the area. Tune in again in the future to see how that comes out. On January 20th, Dave and I, along with our wives, took a trip to Cody, Wyoming. Dave and I went to take a look at what's left of the railroad facilities there, while our wives came along to shop and enjoy lunch at the Irma Cafe. In the first half of the 20th century, the line to Cody was booming with tourist traffic into Yellowstone National Park and the opening of the Husky Refinery. There was also growing agricultural and oil field businesses that needed rail traffic, along with new smaller industries springing up. In the second half of the century, though passenger traffic on the line disappeared, the refinery was still shipping and receiving a lot of products, and a new U.S. gypsum plant added to the traffic. Unfortunately, towards the end of the century, local smaller industries closed or switched to shipping via truck, and then later, the Husky Refinery itself closed down completely. Finally, in 2020, the gypsum plant closed. Today there is essentially no rail traffic into Cody, except to turn the occasional trains that still service Ralston and Powell. Our visit was kind of a sad one, seeing how much was closed, abandoned, or just plain gone. But it was useful. I'm getting ready to plan out Cody on the layout, and though things have changed greatly there, the sheer magnitude of railroading leaves many clues as to what had been there before. Dave's recollections of servicing the line as an engineer, along with the many photos I was able to take, plus other sources, will help me greatly in laying out the Cody area. In early February, I'd ordered a low-end HP laptop. Its purpose would be twofold: to drive the Elgato prompter I use for making videos, and to connect JMRI to the layout and run Decoder Pro for programming locomotives. This laptop ran Windows 11. The laptop ran the prompter just fine. About a week after it arrived, I installed JMRI and hooked it to my NCE system. When I started Decoder Pro, it couldn't connect to my DCC system because it said the COM port was in use. This began many hours of frustrating efforts to make it work. Sorry about the quality of these images. I was snapping shots of the laptop screen with my phone. I spent several hours trying to resolve the problem, checking the settings of the COM port, changing them around, and trying again. I removed JMRI from the laptop and reinstalled it several times. Nothing worked. I tried the cable on my desktop computer, which is Windows 10, and the cable worked just fine. Decoder Pro opened the COM port without a hiccup, so I knew the problem wasn't the cable. I posted the issue on the JMRI and NCE user groups asking for advice and help. Many suggestions were forthcoming, but nothing resolved the problem. I kept getting that same COM port is in use message no matter what I tried. This shot is showing the Decoder Pro log. The highlighted line is where it records the error message. Finally, when nothing worked, I called HP Technical Support for help with the issue. Their response was quite simple. It's a software problem, so you'll have to pay for support. Excuse me, the COM ports are not working properly on a brand new laptop, and I have to pay for you to help fix it? I packed up the laptop and shipped it back to HP. I'll never purchase another one of their products. I trotted down to Walmart and bought an inexpensive Asus laptop, again Windows 11, since that's all they carry. Same exact problem. At this point, I was pretty sure it was a Windows 11 issue. The cable worked fine on my Windows 10 desktop, but not on two Windows 11 laptops. They came from different manufacturers. At this point, I had to stop for several days to take my wife to Denver. That break probably saved my sanity. We got back on the 27th, and on the 29th I was back at the laptop having no luck. Until, just by chance, I came across someone who reported the same issue with Windows 11 on a Microsoft support website. One of the answers to his question said the comport drivers were at fault, and they provided a website where new drivers could be downloaded. So I downloaded and installed the new drivers, fired up Decoder Pro, and shock of shocks, it worked! Comport issue resolved. I can now program all my locos on my own layout using Decoder Pro. I programmed 2 of them last night. I spent well over 50 hours trying to make Decoder Pro work, all because the port drivers Microsoft provides with Windows 11 don't work, and finding ones that did work was just a stroke of luck. I really don't like fighting computers like this. They should just work. After I recorded the intro to this month's video this morning, I fired up Decoder Pro again to get a couple of screenshots for this video. At least I tried to. After working fine yesterday, this morning I'm faced with this. Decoder Pro will not start at all. I don't even know where to start with this one. I'll tell you, much more of this, and I'm going to switch from model railroading as a full-time hobby to drinking. Once I thought the computer nightmare was solved, I was able to get back to actually working on the layout. On March 1st, I started building turnouts again, beginning with this one for the industrial spur in Douglas. I should have it installed by the operating session on March 21st. About the only other thing I did in February was add a couple more freight cars to the layout. The first was this Wyoming and Northwestern boxcar I got from Bill in Sheridan. All I had to do was weather it, and it was ready to go. I also built and weathered this Proto 2000 tank car. This one took a few days. These kits are much more detailed than most, with separately applied grab irons and such. Some of those small parts are very fragile, but after assembly, they make for a nice piece of rolling stock. And there we have it. This month, I'm going to work more on the rock castings in the canyon. I'll probably be saying that for years to come. I'll try to make some progress in Powell, and if I can work up the nerve, I'll add that bismuth alloy to the S2 boiler. I'll also continue building freight cars. The late winter operating session is coming up March 21st, meaning I'll be taking several days off of layout construction to prepare for that. If anyone is interested in attending, drop me a note. You can find my email address in the About screen that comes up when you click on the channel description here on my channel homepage. Click on the View Email Address button under Channel Details, check and submit the I'm Not a Robot box, and my email should appear. Hey, but don't leave yet. Remember, appended to the end of this video is the inaugural Cronkite segment. At least stick around for the first one. And with that, thanks for watching, everyone. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you next month. In the early 1970s, in my teens, I was just getting started in model railroading. Like many others, I started and then abandoned a whole series of layouts. In 1972, I started what would be my first long-term layout. It lasted all of about 2 years. I had some slides of those early years, mostly faded and color shifted with age. But I discovered that using the power of DaVinci Resolve to color correct and otherwise improve questionable images, I got some pretty good results. Here they are. My first permanent layout in Cheyenne, Wyoming, started as a simple loop of track with a couple of switches on the near edge of the table, a simple 4x8. Still a rough-looking picture? This was the original. The ones that follow were similarly deteriorated. Here's a shot of me working on the layout. I was 16 years old. What a handsome guy I was, huh? Boy, I don't know what happened in the intervening years. Sometime around the middle of the year, I started on my first ever scenery. This did not last long. I was about to begin building upwards, and the plaster work would have to go. At this point in my modeling career, locomotives were AHM and secondhand Varney, while rolling stock was mostly AHM purchased at Woolco in Greeley, Colorado, with a few Athearn and Roundhouse kits thrown in as I could afford them. And that's the way it was. 1972.